Hey, it's Andrew at Beach Hill Range in Conroe, Texas again. We're going to do a little scope swap on this Remington 700 rifle here for a customer. And it's a good opportunity to explain how things have changed over the last 20 or so years with scopes and what challenges that might pose when you go to mount a newer scope on a rifle setup like this one. So this is a Remington 700 that at some point has been restocked in a Boyd's stock. It has the factory sporter barrel contour. So the project with this rifle for this customer is he had had a normal muzzle brake on the end, and he wanted to move to this Yankee Hill resonator silencer. So he had bought some adapters. He wanted us to pull that muzzle brake, which we did. And unfortunately, the adapters he provided were all 5/8 24, and this is threaded half 28. So we're going to have to he's going to have to either buy new adapters, or we're going to have to adapt those threads up to 5/8 24 to get the silencer on. But the biggest thing we're going to concentrate on right now is the scope. Currently, he's got one of my old school favorite scopes from the 80s, a Shepherd. This is a Shepherd scope, and this was one of the scopes that really pioneered the one-shot zero process. And he wants to change that to this Leopold VX Freedom 4 to 12, which he bought from us. So here's where the challenge goes. We can see how long this scope tube is. That's a VX4. So you can see that there is just a marked difference in the overall length of the tube. Now both tubes are 1 inch diameter, so we don't have to worry about that particular change too much. But you can see how over the years, probably especially since the year 2000, scopes have gotten shorter and they've gotten bigger around in tube diameter. So where once 30 millimeter scopes were rare, now they're almost commonplace. They're more commonplace really than 1 inch scopes anymore. And we're seeing a lot more of the 34 and 35 millimeter scopes, even in the hunting world, whereas normally they were typically just a tactical scope or some type of big target scope. So now we're seeing those quite a bit being used on hunting rifles, and that sometimes causes us a bit of an issue with mounting scopes. Now the Remington 700, this is a 308, so this is a short action rifle. So we have to get both rings obviously on this tube. So this particular ring setup isn't going to work. So on a scope with this short of a tube length on it, we typically are going to go with some form of Picatinny rail, and we use a lot of this D&Z product, the D&Z Freedom Reaper rail. One thing to consider on the Remington 700, you have short action, you have long action, but now you also have two different hole diameter screw holes in the receiver. You've got the 648, the traditional thread pattern, and now there are guns with the 840 thread pattern. So you have to make sure that you have the exact right base for the rifle. Now these rings, we may be able to reverse this ring and modify it to where we can get the scope on there, but our eye relief wouldn't be correct for this customer. And with the size of the objective bell on this scope, we certainly would be contacting this barrel. So these rings and bases pretty much have to go. We pulled the bolt out here, so we know that we're not going to have a problem with that. Fortunately, it's a modern set of rings, so they're Torx 15. They're not Allen keys or the old slotted keys. And hey, I mean, I have not pre-tested this, so if we run into problems, we're running into problems live. So they don't seem to have been Loctited down or any other kind of nefarious activity going on here that would cause us some problems with getting these bases off. Now what we see sometimes, we'll see a lot of people just pull one of these ring screws on these Leopold style bases and then use the scope to lever off this front ring. Not a huge fan of that because this is a decent scope and he may want to put it on some other rifle, and we don't want to take a risk of bending this tube. So we'll set that scope, the Shepherd scope, off to the side. And just for example, we can see just how this absolutely is not going to work on this rifle. See, we're in the objective bell here, obviously, and it's just not going to work at all. So we're going to have to pull the bases off. Now normally, you know, we could pull the rings off separately, but I can get to all of these screws. And again, we're Torx 15 on these newer Leupold bases. The ones that are generally hard to get off are the old style, really old style Leupold or Redfield, where there's slotted screws that come up from the bottom of the ring. And then people will have Loctited those in there or put some type of thread locker in it back in 1982 or whenever they put them on there. And then they can be a bit of a pain in the butt to take off. So we've got those off, and we'll put them back together here for the customer when we get done. So we're 648 receiver threads here, so we're in good shape with that. We'll pull this D&Z product. One thing about D&Z, they make really good stuff, but, and this one kind of goes against what we normally find with D&Z product. Normally, when you open one of these clamshell packages from a D&Z product, it's very, very brittle and it breaks. D&Z, if you're listening, you make a great product, your packaging is crap. We got to fix that, because if you try to go and reseal the D&Z packaging, it's just not going to work. It's going to break up. I think I talked to you guys about that at SHOT. Maybe you'll listen, I don't know. All right. So the D&Z product is not Torx. I wish it was, but it's not. So we're going to run our screws in here. And this is a higher bench than, we have a scope mounting bench in the front. That's pretty much all we do on it. And it's lower than this to allow me to get more straight down on top of it so that I can see better, because I'm vertically challenged to a degree anyway. All right, so I'm going as snug as I can get them right here. I'm going to move to my Wheeler fat wrench. I'm going to set that at 30 inch-pounds. So now we're going to go with ring height. Is always a bit, obviously it's got to clear, but we want to keep the scope as low to the bore axis as possible. Now, bear in mind that we don't have any drop to the comb here, so we're kind of like an AR in that regard. So I believe with the height of this rail, I believe we can get by with medium rings. We have a 50 millimeter objective bell on a 1-inch tube. So the ring height is going to differ, or it's going to be based on the difference between the objective bell and the main tube diameter. So if we have, say, a 25 millimeter or 26 millimeter main tube, roughly an inch, and we have 50 millimeters of objective bell, 50 minus 26 is 24, divided by 2 is 12. So we have to have 12 millimeters of height, a little more than 12 millimeters of height, to clear what would be a straight line from the bottom of, or from the receiver. Now, bear that in mind, we do have a little bit of barrel contour here, so that's going to help us out quite a bit too, give us a little bit of fudge room. Now, we're using Vortex Pro Series rings. I'm a big fan of these rings. They're really well made. They don't require any lapping. They hold the scope well, and they use Torx screws. So larger Torx screws, these are T20s. And the rings are inscribed, they're engraved with the recommended torque value for these particular, the screws here at attached to the base, or the ring to the base, are supposed to be torqued at 30. I tend to always put my ring screws, whether it's regardless of what type it is, on the other side from the ejection port. I don't put them on the ejection port side, particularly ones that have big locking nuts or what have you. I tend to put them on the side away from the ejection port. So we're going to set this ring fairly far back, and when we set the ring up on the base, you have a little bit of forward to rear play. Push it all the way forward against the stop of the Picatinny rail, and then lock the ring down. That way it acts as a recoil lug and makes it less liable to shift from inertia under recoil. So our other ring, still in the box. We believe that's going to be about right for this scope. We need to come out a little bit, let that ring sit. We're going to pull it all the way forward again against the stop on the pick rail. And before we lock these down, we're going to go ahead and pull. We're going to mock this scope up on here to see if we like how it looks and how it's going to set. Now that Shepherd scope that came off of it had a fairly tight eye relief. So we've got a little bit more wiggle room in that regard with this newer loophole. So we don't have to set necessarily as far back, but we don't want the customer to be crawling his head, having to crawl forward on the stock. I'm not a huge fan of these, but that's just me. So we may be even able to go with lows, but let's check one thing real quick. We should have plenty of room here, but we're going to check to make sure we have clearance here, and we do. Get that back out and just get it out of the way. So we could go with, we probably could get away with low rings. We have to watch out for a few things. We have to watch out obviously here, but we also have to have clearance here, here, and then here for the power ring here. So we're actually going to, now I think we're okay with eye relief there. We're just going to mock this up real quick before we level everything down. I just want to put a couple of screws in here, not tight at all, so the scope won't fly off when I pull the rifle out of the vise. And then we'll go back and lock everything, level it up, and then lock it all down. Then we'll bore sight it, and then finish making it ready for the range. Whoop. All right, I've got complete field of vision all the way around the scope right there. So that's pretty good. And that's leveled by my eye anyway. So what we can do is we can shoot across here. Now there are a few ways to do this. There are leveling tools that wedge in between here that utilize the theory that, you know, the lines are, if they're parallel, if those are parallel, then the scope reticle must be straight, and that's a true statement. Okay. But if you level across the base, and then level across the top. There's usually a flat on the top of the elevation turret. That's the same thing. Or you can pull the ring level across the ring half, and that should give you, and then level across here, and that should give you a level scope also. But yeah, I always check it by eye because, gosh, I just prefer to do it by eye as well. So we're good on eye relief. That eye relief is fine for me. But even note that if we were to try to do anything else to pull the scope back even further, we could do that. We'd have to move this ring back. We could move this ring back to the last notch, and then we could move this ring back forward. We'd probably get another ½ inch maybe backwards. But be that as it may, we don't want the guy to, wear a scope when we get done. So we're going to go ahead and start locking the scope down. First thing we're going to do is we're just going to take up some torque on these just to keep the scope from rotating. I doubt it would, but these these bottom screw are supposed to be torqued to 30 inch-pounds. Now, also, when you go for ring positioning on the tube, pay attention to this crease where the ocular bell meets the main tube. You don't want to be tightening right. You don't want to be tightening right on that ring. I prefer to leave at least an 1/8 and preferably up to a quarter, 3/16 to a quarter inch off of this juncture here, so that we don't run the risk of crimping anything inside the scope and causing some problems. So now we're going to set the rest of our screws up top. One of the classic things that we see when someone brings a rifle in is there's an uneven gap between the ring halves. You'll see a large gap on this side and no gap on this side, or vice versa. And you typically don't find that with the better rings. These Vortex Pro Series rings, they do a good job of meeting up. And the reason for that, you don't want that gap to be there, is you don't want uneven pressure on this scope. We're going to run these screws back in. We're going to take a quick look at that gap. To make sure we're not causing any problems. And the other thing is, I don't want this rifle to go out of this shop and somebody look at it and say, what 12-year-old mounted that scope? Well, no. It's not going to come out of our shop that way. So, and again, this is one of the services that we offer here at BTO Range. This individual bought this scope from us, so everything that I'm doing right here is at no extra cost to this customer except for the part. He is going to have to buy the base and rings, and he bought the scope already. But we're not going to charge him to mount, even shoot it, except for the cost of the ammo, and he brought ammo for that. So that's a service that we offer, and it's what helps us compete with the likes of the big box. A lot of people sell Leupold scopes, and the various big box stores, Academy and all that, sell the scopes. And this gives us a little way to compete with them instead of just making it a race to the bottom on price. So what I'm doing here is I'm bringing these up to snug here. Magnets died in that. So these ring tops, according to Vortex, according to the manufacturer, should be at 18 inch-pounds. So I'm going to take this fat wrench to 18 inch-pounds. And we're going to come in here, and I do it kind of like we're doing lug nuts on a wheel. I alternate from side to side in an X pattern. Torx 20, put that back up. Level up. So we're not going to need these rings. Thankfully, these high rings, that's good. We probably could have gotten away with lows but I'm worried about having to roll your head over here. So this factors into your ring height decision as well. So now in order to get this ready to go to the range, the only thing we have left to do is clean the bore, double check the torque values on these action screws, use our bore solder, attach the silencer. We've already checked the bore alignment with a range rod, and the bore alignment is good all the way through that silencer, so that's good news. And then we're going to go shoot it on the range, and we've already talked about that, I think, in a previous video. So if you like what we're doing, check out our other videos. We try to post content every week at least of some type or another. And hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share it, make comments, let us know what you think. If there's a topic you want us to talk about, or a make or model you want us to talk about, let us know in the comments. We'll see what we can do. As always, we appreciate your watching the channel. It means a lot to us, and have a good day.